what keys do I really need to press to do that design theory? You know, the tangible, right? If you guys work in the field and work in concept art, when you have a meeting with an art director, sometimes it's kind of ambiguous. It's like, yeah, keep going, make it badass, make it cool. And you're like, how? Like, I understand where you want me to go, but how do I make it look more badass? Like, what do you need? Is it like blood, or do you need like sparks? Like, what is it, right? So, again, back to the tangible, you know? All right, anyway, back to this. So let's just kind of keep that idea in mind. We'll just go boom, right? Now we're creating some kind of a rhythm almost. Big, medium, and small, right? It's creating a rhythm. But this has a rhythm too, but now we're creating different rhythms, right? What could we do if we just change some of the proportions more immediately? Right? What do we do? What happens if we just change and stretch? We're not really doing the 3 arrangement anymore, but it is trying to get using the theory of spicy, right? Just go oblong, stretch. And it's nice to have these kind of go-to remedies or tools that you could use in your design arsenal, your design toolbox. I remember the old Batman TV show. It was so funny. Every time they get into a jam, any kind of problem, Batman goes, "Let me go to my utility belt." And he has something just for that special occasion. It was magic, right? But that's what it is. We have to have this utility belt of design theories and shapes that we like and stuff like that, you know? All right, here we go. Right, and that's how we want to do it, okay? So we go from mild, medium, to spicy quite quickly. We're not trying to utilize, like, start from scratch on each one, but perhaps create a rhythm, you know? And we can duplicate it just by utilizing the ideas of, or duplicating the layers, you know? So look at those kind of designs, right? They have different feelings, different aggressiveness, you know? It's kind of fun. So right now, when we look at these, we have 3 different shapes, okay? I'm just going to take the medium one, all right? I'm going to start with the medium one here. It's pretty basic. Now, this is just with triangles, all right? This is just with a triangle shape. The shape, initial Lego shape is like a triangle, but as you go into, like, you know, the more mild, medium, and spicy, it starts to change. It's not a triangle silhouette, but it's triangular shapes making different silhouettes, you know? So try to play around with those, and let's get into a painting now. Okay, so my idea now is to put this into a more complex scene. All right, oops, let me grab this. There we go. Okay, so I want to do a couple of things. Number one, let's design the silhouette, which we did. Design the silhouette. Okay, number one. Number two, let's start putting it, the idea is we're going to put it into a composition or a location composition, and we're going to design the inside. We're going to design the interior information. All right. And I'm going to put it into a composition. I'm just going to sketch something really, really quickly. Here we go. Let me, whoop. Okay, there we go. Okay. So first off is, let me just draw in just a couple of bits of information here, right? So I'm thinking that there's like a ground plane here, simple ground plane, just like you did, just like everyone's doing already, but you guys did it like in a 3D space like this. Now we're going to imagine, instead of having your block here, where we're looking at it at an isometric viewpoint, we're going to now just think about dropping a camera into the scene here, right? And shooting it like this. Okay, the same, well, I don't know why I'm holding my hand up like this whole time. But the same idea of what you guys did here, see this line? Imagine that goes all the way back and then eventually meets what's called the horizon line. And that's what's back here, right? So if I were to draw this box and our triangle shaped thing was in here, it would, let me draw these lines. They'd be like that. Okay, so I just want us to be able to really visualize what we're doing here. It's the same thing, but we're just dropping in a camera, right? We're just, from here to there, going in kid view mode. And then we have the sky, right? And the sky is something else that I'll talk about, but I just want to think about it as this backdrop. Now, normally sky goes above our head, but I just want to think about it as a backdrop for now. Later, we can actually think about extending this and having a actual sky top, here. But you can kind of see, we're looking at this like a diorama, like a little model, right? And this is the best way to think about environments. Pull yourself out, look at the environment like this little shoebox design, Cool. There we go. This is important to kind of think about. All right. Boop. Okay. So here we go. These are all workflow kind of tips to do that. All right. Here we go. You know how we were working on basic lighting scenario? Just kind of things are lit from the top down, maybe at an angle where we see a cast shadow. Again, it's going to go very, very simple with the lighting. Okay. Back here, we could have some clouds. We can have some cloud. Let's just say. And I want to think about these shapes, big, medium, and small, parallaxing. Parallaxing is where you see objects behind, and even rhythmically, there's horizontal rhythms here, and the rock here is more vertical. So they're opposing rhythms. Yeah, so I'm just gonna do some sky back there, some clouds, nice gradation of a sky back there. So we'll do this. All right. So what are our basic elements today? If we really had to break it down, we have sky, ground, and then whatever object in the middle, which I like to call the POI, the point of interest. Okay, point of interest. Sometimes building, mountain, spaceship, character, whatever it is, right? The point of interest. Much like a sandwich, this is it. Sky, ground, and then the something in the middle is the meat, right? As an environment designer or someone that does a lot of these scenes, we're always making sound. I became a master sandwich maker, because immediately you go, what is the world? Oh, there's 2 pieces of bread. Okay, let me start with that first. When you make a sandwich, let's get the bread toasted, okay? So let's go to our reference, okay? I gathered up some reference material, all right? And this is photo bashing. So I want to show you guys, well, what if we find the perfect ground? Well, then you're absolutely lucky, right? If you can go and find on the internet or something that's really unique, matches perfectly what you designed, it's usable, it's high res, it's very challenging to find that stuff, right? So why not try to construct? Let's see if we can construct this stuff. So I have this photo here. I like this part. So let's use this part to see if we can create a ground plane, all right? That's going to be my initial starting point. But I have nothing to clip this into, right? I need to clip these into a silhouette. The sky and the ground are no different than your POI. We need a shape to clip these into, right? So according to my drawing, I had a, let's see, like a horizon line back here like this. So why not just fill this in black? Okay, and now I'll start clipping this in. Clipping this in, right? Now for some of you, maybe you guys use material that's like this, that does not fill in the shape, you know? So we have to be a little bit constructive with how we do this, right? We also know that there's a couple of rules in here that we automatically know. We just need to pay attention, right? It's the ground, so there's a lot of convergence, a lot of depth and perspective, a lot of foreshortening. So details have to be big up front and like microscopic at the horizon line, right? At least we know that, you know? So let's just start there. And what better stuff to use than the information that is actually inside of the paint of the photo? Shrink it down, rotate it around, but be careful to not have recognizable rhythms. You know, talk about being. My parents always told me, James, lying is not honest. Right? We all know that rule, right? Like lying is not good. But that's what we're doing here, man. As concept artists, as designers, we're like making like this such believable lies. So we want to pay attention to anything that pulls you out of the painting or out of the design, right? You know, so it's like if you see like weird CG on a movie, you're like, oh, I can't watch the movie. I'm like paying attention to that bad CG. That's pulling you out of the context. That's what I mean. So if I see these rhythms, like this, you see how these two rocks are meeting right here, and it's creating like this wedge shape, this triangle shape. That's unnatural. No right angles in nature like that, right? So if I wanted to make this look man-made and ancient, well, then I'm doing it right. You see? That we have to know about history. We have to triangulate like art, skills, and knowledge to be this perfect triangle, you know? That's what really good designers do. If it doesn't have the knowledge, then it's not believable, you know? Then it's just inspirational, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I want to think about here is, am I trying to make this a man-made thing? Or can I do enough to this photo bash it with the same material so that it feels organic, you know? And that's really the key word here. Let's get this to feel organic, right? So I'm going to use all of the tools to my arsenal. You guys know how to mask. You guys know how to photo bash with different layer settings. We know that darken does certain things compared to lighten. And can we utilize that mixture, right, of all the things that we have to our arsenal to create the image to work for our favor, you know? Now, I'm worrying about layout right now. Okay, layout is where I focus on putting in the photos to just skim the surface. Not worried about lighting, not worried about value control, not worried about any of that stuff. In fact, if I worry about those now, I'm gonna get confused. Okay, let's just be like a simple robot and like one task at a time kind of robot, right? So let me do the ground first, make sure it's really good, make sure that I'm at least doing the foreshortening, big objects up front, smaller objects at the horizon line. But the big thing that I need to look out for is, remember when I was saying things that pull you out of the concept? That's what I got to look out for. That's really what my eye's trying to do, you know? And it's cool. Like so far, I'm not seeing too many things that are very repeated. I will circle them right now. This is what my eye's telling me. You know, it's like I see this shape and it's like, whoa, that's like the same rock. And these are very much in a line, like a little too parallel for my taste. Kind of here too. You know, I kind of don't like that. But anything else in here? I think it's okay. All right. So those are the things that my eye's paying attention to, right? I see these two things in the front. Boom, boom. They feel twinned. They feel the same size. These parallel lines. So what can we do? All right, we know photo bashing, right? So let's photo bash. Let's take some material. The parallel lines are created by what? The rock, this gray rock, or the brown dirt?
Gray rock.
Gray rock. So how do we fight it? Brown rocks. Let's use the brown rocks, you know? And we're going to use some of this material in its organic shape to cover it up. Boom. Okay. So you see this. I took more rock, or more brown rock. And I can even make it stretch the proportions. So now it feels like it's sitting on the ground, when before it was more of like this, like more of a vertical clump, you know? And they put it on here and it doesn't sit. It doesn't sit on the surface properly. So we need to make sure, again, because all surface has a direction. Okay, now even right there, without putting this on any other layer settings, you see how the noise of that brown rock starts to override the parallel lines. Now it's messy. Now it's noisy. That's what we want. Or you can put on lights and layer, screen, overlay. Actually, I think even darken works too. It looks like there's like holes or like crevices or like plating. I don't know if I'm making this make sense, but it kind of looks like the rocks go like this. They go in and they jut out, and they go in and they jut out. And there's like shadow in here. You know, lights coming down. There's like shadow stuff. So even with like your initial intent, the magic of what photo gives us, man, so many happy accidents. But it's within this controlled realm, you know? Like if I brought in like a picture of the Disney concert hall and I use it in there, then I'm breaking my rules, right? It'll look cool, but I'm totally breaking the rules. So that's kind of like what I need to pay attention to. Look at that ground. Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm actually kind of digging it. Let's see if we can actually see if we can use a little bit more of that darken layer approach. And you know what I also like about working on the ground in kind of finishing it off before we move forward is I think it just creates a little bit of discipline. Like we really understand this ground a lot. Ooh, look what happens here when we like put that darker value. Doesn't it like all of a sudden look like a ledge? Boom, there's a drop off right there, right? Flat, kind of angular, drop off. The power of value control and form and shape. We just change this up so easily, you know? So when an art director goes, hey Jordan, I need like bunkers. I need like guys to be able to duck. Easy. You're like, I got it. I got the photo. I know the technique. I know the layer setting. No problem. You know, so like you walk away with like the direction, the art direction, but you also walk away with like the tangible steps of how to do it, right? And that to me is really the important part. Little shadows there. That's cool. We can even duplicate this, move it around. See, we're like making this into like a wall almost. It totally looks like there's a ledge, like a 6-foot like vertical mound of earth that we have to go up. You know, it's cool. All right. So there we go. We kind of have our ground. I like it. Not too bad so far. Value control, I'm already thinking like we can lighten things up towards the horizon line. Darken things a little bit towards the foreground, but at least as far as how it looks, it's great. Look at that. Put a rock right there. It's already starting to like kind of formulate, you know? All right. Any questions on the ground? If we think about the steps, it's very similar to what we did with the objects, all right? Very, very similar, but just a little bit more, there's just a little bit more to it, right? We have to think about the shapes, what's in the foreground, kind of like these rhythms. As we work on texturing, what we're going to notice is that our eye gets really fooled by like color and some of the surfacing. So if you use like a little bit of gray and there's like a little highlight, like, oh, metal, instantaneously, where our eye is really easy to fool. So, but what our eye does see a lot is rhythms. So let's say Eugenio, I'm looking at Eugenio's your video, and because you have a bright red jacket and a blue right here, I see this rhythm. I cannot unsee it. You know, that's so powerful, right? Like Evan Bat, your arms in like this dark, that's your rhythm. I see a triangle, you know? So these internal rhythms are what we spot, not the texture, you know? Like I know Eugenio's jacket is like fleece or cotton or something like that. But I can only see the rhythm. So really fast we get past texture because we believe it, and then we see rhythm, you know? So let's do that. Let's go to the sky now. Now, the sky is its own thing. We're going to talk about the backdrop, all right? So I'm going to go to a new layer, and let me just find a photo that we're going to use. So boom, sky, sky. I was going to use this actually for ground. This Hawaii one. Oh, it's a horribly low res photo, but that sky is actually pretty epic too. I like that sky. You ever notice sometimes that you go outside and you see a certain type of sky, you're like, ooh, I like that sky. You know, it's like more moody, or you know, there's certain cloud shapes, like a color shift or something. You know, I think I always find myself doing that. Find myself doing that a lot. Like I'm trying to emulate that sky tone.
That's literally like half of the photos on my phone is just skies, because it's like, oh, that looks a little different. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Gotta love it, man. And as a designer, what we also have to realize, hold on, where's my drawing? Here we go. Let me just delete this. As a designer, we also have to know that if we react to it that way, then there's a chance that a lot of other people will have the same emotional reaction to it as well. You know, because we're human. Like Jamie Jones says it's best. If you don't know Jamie Jones, look him up. Jamie Jones, conscious artist, in for a nice treat. But Jamie Jones talks about how, as an artist, we're just trying to replicate real life. That's all we're trying to do. You know, make things really, really believable. All right. Oh, here we go. So we can use these different ideas here. So let me take this whole sky backplate and see what happens when we use these different layer settings. So normal mode, I'm going to jump into darken. Darken does nothing good with this. Multiply gets it really dark. Now we get into lighten and screen. Lighten and screen have a little bit of a better use for here. I like to use screen. Screen tends to blow out, like bleach it out. It gets very bright, right? When I go from normal mode to screen, it's only trying to it's only trying to show the brights, which is good because the clouds, I want to show that bright part of the clouds. So when I actually lower the value of the photo, and that's the thing too, guys, is your photo has a lot of room for your personal subtlety shifting. If we make the photo brighter or darker, we actually get to use it in different ways. Okay, so sometimes when you're doing this, finding a good photo with good, like a good cloud design is like one thing, and then another thing is to like find the right layer setting. You know, so I have something that I like, and I'm just gonna kind of paint it down like this. See that? I'm gonna use parts of the painting here, or parts of the sky, to create my painting, just like we did with the ground. You know, it's like in these different segments and parts, and I want to be the ultimate sort of author to this. Screen, or excuse me, lighten layer. You see how like you could see the clouds well, but now screen, it like, and when we drop the value, I think it works even better. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. I'm just like doing this little section of the clouds really far away towards the horizon line. And where do I need them? Remember when we did the sketch and I drew like clouds on the sides to help promote the silhouette of the shape? Ah, that's nice right there. That's the parallax. That's the counterbalance I'm talking about. You know, I could put a lot of clouds right here, but it's just going to be blocked, right? So Let's keep it going. Yeah, baby. And so sky is great, and we can do a lot of great stuff with the sky and everything. But when we really think about it, we're just trying to create something that makes the silhouette pop forward. You know, if we really wanted to be like the master, you know, the true puppet master, right, for this environment, it's to design the sky so not only looks really good, but it's doing its job compositionally and everything else as well. Ooh, lighten layer actually does work pretty well on this side. So it's good that I'm using these different layer settings, you know. Oops. So as you can see, we're really utilizing like different formulas here. I think if we started this last week, it would have just been like a little too complex. But now that we have a lot of practice, everyone has a lot of practice doing isolated sort of studies, that's going to be the thing to like make this a lot easier. And now we can get kind of inventive. It's like kind of see things in the clouds. Let me go lighten. Like rotate some of these patterns around, just like kind of looking up at the top left. I want a little bit more cloud shapes to kind of connect with the clouds underneath it. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Now since I have my clouds, I can kind of play around with a little bit more value and you know, kind of personalizing it up a little bit. I kind of like this dark gray spot, so let's see if we can actually paint that in. Like maybe I'll go overlay just to kind of darken it down, sample that tone, and just kind of paint it in here. Just give it a little bit more value. There we go. A little bit more depth. I like how light and airy and atmospheric some of the sky can be. Like soften it down ever so much. And this is another idea of contrast where we're really utilizing soft edges in the back to really promote the hard edges up front. There we go. It's looking pretty good. Nice. So here we have it, guys. Ground and sky. They're completely in different color palettes. They're kind of really off in their tone, but we've got them really, really detailed. Okay, so now we have the layout. All right. What I want to do is I want to spend a quick moment just getting them to work together. You know, getting them to work together. So this is going to be my task. Check this out. The biggest cheat in the world. Boom! I'm going to grab this ground. I'm going to do a copy merge because I have it all together here. Okay, all together. I'm going to attach it in there so we see it. Actually, let me show you guys this before. Detail in the back. All right, just a big, super long panorama. Because I'll make you a bet, guys. Well, maybe I'll lose, but my assumption is the same ground in the front of us is the same ground way back there. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to use the same thing. You know, I'm just going to use the same bit. It's the same detail. You're going to get the same grit, the same noise, the consistency will be there. You know? So I'm just going to take that and I'm just going to micro. Boom. Just like really get it. And I'm going to place it around that horizon line. Okay? Layer setting? Absolutely. Probably a lighten layer, right? Boom. We're just getting it to fill in. You see how it's just getting it to fill in some of that dark back there. We can even duplicate it again. Just get it to fill. Because any of those darks that are visible back there, that's what's making it come forward. So watch. When I turn off these two layers, doop, it looks like a mound like maybe 30 yards away. Now it's like, boom, it's like 3 miles away. You know? Just like that. So just know for your purpose as an artist, dark comes forward, light goes back. Just kind of know that instantaneously with read. Texturing, right? We talked about that. You know it's rocks, but you look at the rhythms of dark and light more than the rocks. You know what I mean? Once you kind of eye goes, oh, I believe the rocks, I believe it. Okay, cool. Then you look at like design and rhythm a little bit more. So that's why we're using photo to do that. Do the texturing. You are controlling the rhythms. That's really where the power is. You know what I mean? The real like design power, the design focus should be in there. Okay, now we're going to do one more thing. We're going to tint it. New layer, lighten. I like to sample not the high key part of the sky, not the darkest, but mid. Okay, let me open that up. Not the high key, not the dark, but somewhere mid, right? Boom, boom, boom. And then airbrush, and I'm just going to kick that horizon line even further back. All of those darks start to recede even further back. And now you kind of have to make some decisions. Like when exactly do we stop the, getting it lighter? Because once we have some of these darks visible, now they start to like pop forward a bit, right? Like this rock right here goes back, and forth, back and forth. If it's lighter or darker, So that would be a great thing to focus on. All right. You guys know this step.
Are you just lightening it with the color of the sky there, or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the mid-tone of the sky. Lighten layer on top, just a big airbrush.
Copy. Give that atmospheric perspective deal.
Exactly. So we're using like part of the photo to do half of the atmospheric perspective for the detail drop off and noise, and then we're also using the sky tone to like do the lifting of the bring in some air in between.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And just like as you guys go through your paintings, when you have your silhouettes in here, even these little notch marks that I'm like totally zoomed in on, they do help. Boom. All right. Look at that. Okay. Now, depending on how light the ground is, this rock can feel humongous. If I take out this and it's dark, the rock actually comes closer to us, making the rock smaller. So it's your decisions. It's the scale that you want. If I would say the trap is if you don't make a decision. If you do both, if you use big scale read over here and small scale read over there, then it's confusing. Choosing will make it a better message. Sometimes students say, but James, what if like a person looking at my portfolio says, you should have probably used the other way. What an art director looks at a portfolio is not your ability to be a isolated artist that solves on your own, but can an art director see your ability in design that they can give you guidance along the way? So if you know how to commit to a design, that's a really, really good thing to show in your portfolio. That means you can stick to it. And then the art director just needs to drop in a little bit of like guidance and maybe draw over, paint over to steer you to that finish line. But in a portfolio where it shows a lack of decision making, then the art director doesn't have the confidence to have that discussion. Do you guys see what I mean? So it's important to choose, really, really important. All right. So here we are. We basically just set everything up, okay, to do this. We set the camera. We did the ground plane, okay. We have our object, and we've done the backdrop sky. It just basically just goes up. It doesn't do an actual skybox where it goes overhead. It just goes up, We're going to take a break right here. This is where our location is done, and now we're going to just work on the POI. All right, we're going to work on the POI. So when we come back from like a 10-minute break, I'm going to work on just the POI. It'll be a very similar demo to the first one we did last week. We're not 3/4. We're almost just flat, right? We're just flat. So let's do that. We're going to play around with just like the flat rendering. But I want to throw in a curveball. I want to, remember, like we're talking about rhythms today. How are we going to control rhythms? I have these photos that I thought I'd mess around with. Some of them are rocks, and then some of them are like these interesting rhythms. I'm wondering if we could do something with this. You know, rock rhythms. Ooh, bone? I wonder. Ooh, muddy, bony stuff? Wonder if there's, what is that? An artichoke? You know? It's like, but isn't that a cool rhythm? It's cool. Wonder if there's something we can do. Let's play around, you know? So when we get back from break, I'm gonna play around with trying to create like an interesting photobash rhythm, and then we're gonna light it and then wrap up this image. Okay? So let's do that. I'll see you guys in 10. Spent a lot of time developing this. We have a pretty basic lighting scenario. Right? We see a high key area of light kind of behind the cloud, so we can kind of assume that just from the top, a little bit from the back, you know, that's kind of like the lighting scenario. Something very, very just casual, something very normal. So let's work on the design of the object now. Now, if we use our imagination, we can probably imagine an endless possibility of designs that could be inside of this, right? Let's let some of the photo do that exploration for us. What I want to do first, though, is I want to design the footprint with a little bit more intention. So, for example, if I erase all this, and then this big rock is just floating above the ground, you can kind of come in here and actually delineate where exactly in the footprint of the rock, what elements are in front of it that create sort of this buildup of elements. Because it wouldn't make sense for the footprint just to be completely flat, right? It would be actually very odd. It would have to follow the terrain. So this is what we're doing here is just a part of the where it meets the ground, that footprint. We're adjusting that silhouette ever so slightly. You know, we can put like a bigger shape here or whatever, but I feel like these work pretty well. Sorry, it's like watching paint dry. But sometimes there's just no shortcuts to this stuff. There's times where our painting and our hands are meant to go fast, and there's times when they're meant to go slow. But that really creates a nice like footprint, you know? I like kind of the shapes and the arrangement. Ooh, now we see that atmosphere can be problematic right in front of the rocks, right? Now that we see that. So, you know, part of the thing is, you know, I'm sure you guys have all taken like a lot of classes, like art classes and stuff. And, you know, a lot of instructors have a very like, okay, we want to do this, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. And a lot of times it works up in a very like positive way where you don't have to go backwards. But you see over here, we try to build up the ground in the right way, but we see where it's off, you know? I think that's what develops a good sensitivity in your eye, to be able to look at a painting and be like, ooh, that's, I see where it's off, you know? And be able to identify those pretty carefully. Okay. Let's texture this up. I like these folders. Like when I do world building for like games and fantasy worlds, like League of Legends or something, oftentimes it's like doing this kind of photo bashing exercise where we see things that we can't normally invent from scratch with our hand and with our eye, with our brain, you know. But sometimes when we see it, then the vision comes to life, you know. So this could be a boot. but could also be a really interesting design for a tiled rock or a tiled castle, you know? So like taking the context out of what it is. Like this is a great photo. Look at this. What if we took this and use it in here? Would that be interesting? Yeah, it would, right? Like, and we know some of the quick tricks and ways to just populate it and get it to look interesting, right? I mean, that's already cool. And it already starts to have dimension, and we start to want to light it according to the dimensions that we see, you know? It is interesting. It's not the design per se I wanted to go for, but, you know, it's just to kind of show, like, we can get a lot of very interesting things happening very quickly. So let me work on first just a quick spread of just getting a little bit of let's put here. I want to use this. This is cool. For some reason, just like, man, that's like so interesting. I wonder if we can do things here. Attach, boom. What are we seeing, you know? Because we don't need to be so meticulous right now. The ground and the sky, you know, those are just the locations, and we want to get those in pretty quickly. But here is where we can actually like see a design happening, you know, like the rhythms. Like these rocks look so different than the seashells that we had before, you know. Really, really cool to kind of see that, right? So I want to play around, and let's start actually like getting this a little bit more populated. Trying to look for just rock right now. Oh, I'm gonna use this. This is freaking cool, man. I think this is a wicked picture. Let's just see. I just want to. Whoa. Okay. You ever notice sometimes, like, you ever do this where like your pen just goes and like you blow it up too big, and then you look at it and you go, oh, wait, actually that looks kind of nice. Does that ever happen to you? You know, it's so cool, like how happy accidents can sort of occur. You know, it just makes us see things a little bit better. All right, yeah. So what was our steps last week? We kind of had this idea of a wallpaper, right? Let's just fill it in, okay? Just kind of fill it in. I think we can get complex with it. You know, there's areas of this photo that are just like, I think, really interesting. Whoa, I'm seeing things I didn't see before. I'm seeing a fish, seashells. I just saw bones earlier, and like a cow jaw or something like that. Lighten layer, darken this down. Right, just starts to fill in some of the shapes here. Right. What I want to do is actually just kind of, personally, I like to get rid of the darks. Just kind of fill it all in. Cool. There's a texture and some rhythms. We're not really getting dimension, right? Like, we don't know what shape is in front or how they're connected together. So that's something we want to keep in mind. It's like a more complex shape. So let me grab some more interest here. Let me get some texture going. All right, kind of like this shape over here. This is kind of cool. All right, we can kind of see where this is going. You can kind of see it. I'm gonna shoot this up here real quickly. Boom. Let me see what happens if I put it on lighten layer. Ooh, okay. What happens if we start to distort and use some Photoshop to our advantage, right? Like, we can actually start conforming this to shape things. Starts to round this off, right? Starts to round it off. Now we're actually having a little bit more control. Last week we were just trying to get a basic surface going, you know, front plane, side plane. We're doing very flat, but this, like, we kind of distorted it, you know. Let's shape this. Now what's cool, and what I want to show you guys right now is, you know, that wallpaper, when we did this, see, our eye is very easy to fool. It just needs contrast. So when we do this, our eye sees the rock with the rhythms. We pay attention to some of the dark spots over on the left, and some of the details in the middle, right? Because that's all we could see. That's our optics. But once I turn this on, which is a little bit brighter, now our eye goes, oh, I want to look up, right? It just automatically starts to bring the eye up, right? So that's why the wallpaper can kind of just be a filler. Like, don't try not to put too much emphasis on it, because it's really the stuff that we're going to add on top of it, the pictures, which is going to be the focal point rather than the wallpaper, right? So now we're adding kind of like the picture frame on the wall, So I'm going to use this. This is my zone. Boom. I'm just going to start adding this to my design language. It's almost like this curved turtle shell top rock. I don't know how else to call it. Nice. Actually, kind of like it. So we're letting textures sort of create different rhythms along themselves. I can come under the. I can go underneath these layers here that I just put on top, right? So these layers that I'm turning on and off, that's the wallpaper, right? All of this, okay, wallpaper. Let me put this all in one color so you can kind of like pick apart this file. That's all wallpaper. This is going to sit on top, right? That's like delineating the top surface, right? So I'll put that orange. Now underneath here, I can manually paint and make this all feel like there's, a consistency with like the recessing, the little negative shapes in here, we're going to eventually look at, and then we're going to notice that they're all kind of inconsistent. So at least this is a way to just get that out of the way. So from here, I kind of enjoy what's going on, but I want to design like the front part of it. Maybe there's like a different rhythm that like cascades down. So it's I don't know why I'm using my hands to do this. Let's draw it. So it's kind of like a shape like this. Just curved. And then it will go like a really cool, like just language, So then now I know, like if I have rhythms going this way, that's not the right idea. I need rhythms to go this way. Vertical. Vertical, 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 vertical. Kind of like that. Okay. So, do I have some photos that can do that? Or can I create something that does that? Maybe we could use this. On initial thought, right? Stretch it out. Warp. Okay. Start to really be the sort of puppet master for all this stuff, because you have like the ultimate control. And if you have a high resolution enough image, then you can probably get away with a lot of that, right? So let's put that right under. Ooh, what a mess. Okay, let's use our magic wand, our paintbrush, to figure it out. But I want to do it sort of like in this controlled area first. Just like when we did the top of the rock, we just did it in the middle first and kind of figured out what it was. Then we can just duplicate that layer anywhere. Let's figure out the layer setting. What's the right visibility? Because lighting's coming from the top, right? So we should have more visibility on the top. Like that wall portion should be a little bit more in shadow. So that's what I'm going to kind of focus on. All right. So we can go into lighten layer and lower the contrast visibility. We can do that. It starts to get a little too loose. I'd like to see a little bit more. Or should we use darken? Ooh, right? That starts to make it feel a little bit different as well. I actually kind of like the darken, to be honest. And why? Because it gives it the shadow edge also. It kind of does dual purpose for me, So whether or not you like the design of the rock, you can find another rhythm. But the same exploration on how and what, like how we're going to use the layers, that's all the same. Should I use lighten? Should I use darken? And how do I curve up and down the image, the source image, to work in the layers better? Does that make sense? Yeah, so here we go. Boom. So let's just keep this going. Bam. It's gonna put a little piece up there. And I want to erase the areas that I don't need. Paint that back in using a mask. There we go. Just kind of feels like it's being shaped, right? It's being formatted. It's cool. This, I'm just duplicating the layer over because now I know how to more or less use it. Maybe I'll flip this way. Cool. It's actually working pretty well. This is a lot smoother than I thought it was going to go. Got like a rock further away, so maybe we crunch the details and like make it more of a curvature. Your paintbrush is the magic wand. It is there to fix anything that you feel is pretty inconsistent. Because we isn't it crazy? Like we basically painted this thing with not a lot of paint. We're just using the brush to kind of finesse, push, control edges. There's like ultimate photos. A lot of people in film, because of the deadline schedules in film, this is like the go-to techniques, or 3D base plus a lot of this. But all the illustrators in the film industry, they have a really good handle with if they had to do this more manually, like a paintbrush, they could still do it. It would just take longer, So they shortcut a lot of the stuff with photo. Now, it's cool to do that, but you know what happens? When I use too much photo and this process all the time, I lose my painting sensibility. But that's the thing that controls all the photos. That's the thing that I know, it has to be brighter over there, more blue, because I paint. So it's always like this balance. The more I do like technical stuff, I have to kind of practice on my own time the fundamental stuff, Okay, here we are. That's pretty cool. I like it.
The way you use painting is mostly for reduce the crispiness of an image as a ending process.
Mm-hmm. That's one aspect. Yes, that's one aspect. But like the early on decision making of composition, shapes, lighting, a lot of that comes through practice from painting, or just drawing it a lot, Okay, so here we are. We have our image. Let's do a couple of things here. Number one, let's go and finesse the silhouette. Okay, we'll go in here and just kind of get rid of edges that really don't belong. Boom, 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 boom. All right, and all these edges look pretty good. I'm noticing inside the painting some of the areas that I will have to paint by hand to fix. There's an area right here that's very bothersome. Right, textures are just merging into each other without any rhyme or reason. A little bit of shape language, especially around this high contrast point up here, where silhouettes are at the highest read. I'm gonna make more information happen here. Make it more informative. Yeah, keeping the same basic silhouette, hopefully keeping and retaining all of that design language and stuff, but just giving it a little bit more detail edge. So as we're getting a little bit more independent, right? We're getting a little bit more creative with how we can use photo. Stretching, pulling, using different photos on top of each other. Something to create the base, something to create the visual, what do you call it? The visual interesting stuff. Like the stuff that we're adding on top. So we're like mixing things together, mixing materials. Something that we're going to do next week is, as we get comfortable with this, we're gonna invite more materials, like metal. Imagine there's like there's like a destroyed tank in a rock field and there's plants growing on it. Like, it's just different materials, right? But like the same process, like we would do isolation of plants just like we would do isolation of this rock, you know, the tank. So next week we're going to like really start pushing a little bit more inventive, creative scenarios with more materials, right? So this is like our segue. This is our in-between. Let this just be an exercise for, all right, can we do more complex image of the same techniques we did last week? That's kind of the idea. Sweet. I kind of like it. So far, so good. There's things that I don't like, you know, like the colors of this image are kind of like all scattered. It's like brown ground and then gray and then blue, you know, it's like all over the place. So we're gonna have to fix and mute it. I'll show you guys how to do that just in a little bit. It's actually really, really simple, just more unifying things. And then we'll push some lighting, a little bit of lighting aspects, and we're getting really, really close, you know. So let me start here. Actually, let me also break down this file really quickly because I just want to make sure we have a good kind of step-by-step. So boom, that was one of the big goal points was here. We also had it where it was just no ground, no sky. Let's take all that out. That was another big goal point. Okay, so we have 1, 2. Let me see here. 2. Okay. I'll just turn this off. Boop. Like that. Here we are. Work on the ground, sky. This could be our update on populating the rock. Okay. And there's stuff that we can always add to make this scene a little bit more complex. But let's start as our really, really big goal point. Okay. Now let's do a little bit of atmosphere, color correcting, a little bit of lighting. Okay. Because now we know the form, we know where the light's coming from. So we're gonna first start off by using a new layer and start off by using color. This color layer, okay? And I'm just gonna bring in the ground color into the rock. All right, so I'm gonna use my paintbrush, and now I can just paint in that brown color, that brownish tone. Okay, I'm doing it a little bit softly. I'm not doing it I'm not doing it too hard like that. Okay, I'm just kind of slowly bringing it in. All right, cool. It's starting to already kind of fit together a little bit because the tonality is starting to merge, right? Just the idea of the colors of the rocks. This atmosphere back here, let's do a quick adjustment by just putting it behind the areas of behind the rock. Okay, just kind of bring it in way, way further back there. I want to put a cast shadow on the ground, you know? I want to put a cast shadow on the ground to kind of give it a, that object is, you know, giving it a shadow. So that's going to sit on the ground plane. And I will use a curve, attach it into the ground plane, and now we can actually add in that shadow. And with looking right here, because that's where it's important, where the object meets the ground, I'm trying to find the right value. That feels a little, like that's definitely too dark. This is definitely too bright. There's like a range in between where it feels like it really works together. And I want to squint my eyes down to be able to see that detail, to see that information. Okay? Squint my eyes down. It's like something right around here. Turn that off. Okay? Now I can paint it in manually with my paintbrush. Make it feel like this big rock is creating this very large shadow that could even come and affect parts of the foreground here, you know? Just like that. Big, big, big shadow. Just kind of describing a little bit more, giving it a cast shadow here from this wall. Again, squinting my eyes, trying to see the very basic lighting scenario here, like just the top, some of the top surfaces lit, and then the side becomes more into shadow. Okay, boom, nice clean shadow line. Cool. Good like that. There we go. There we go. Nice. Not looking too bad. Okay. And at the very end, we're just going to kind of go in and do some touch-ups. All right. We want to paint in like basically the stitching. We want to make sure that we're getting some of those elements in there. But actually, I want to work on like a little bit of a focal point. Let's see here. Let's get inventive a bit. Going back to this, going back to the artichoke, got to make it work somehow. Like it's a challenge for me. And I was looking at this little gaping hole right here. Right, I'm like, ooh, that could be a focal point. That could be the place that we're supposed to go. You know, that's fun. Gives us a point of interest within the point of interest, right? So maybe I can make that something where that's the target. You know, that's where we got to go, right? And I can make a cave. I could obviously use that shape. It kind of looks like a mouth or something. But shoot, maybe I could use this. Make it like very, I don't know, just very abstract. Or we can figure something out cool, you know? So let's try. Let's see. Darken layer. I don't know if I can even do this. Let's see. What could be... No, I don't know if that works. It's just kind of like carving, you know, carving something out. We're using that as like the object where we're just, I don't know, trying to shape and figure out how it actually fits in. Becomes kind of like a fun way to design, you know. I feel like we're designing with like actual Lego pieces instead of like having to always create it from scratch by your hand, you know. I don't know. I was never that kind of designer. I know there are. Like I've seen them in my classes when I was a student. You know, like they could just draw shapes that are in their head. Like, wow, really talented. Like how come I can't do that? But like sometimes we have our different superpowers. You know, we're not all Cyclops, right? You know, but sometimes we have different powers. You know, and we just need to figure out those and really like learn how to utilize them in a more meaningful way. You know, and the more I started to think about what's my superpower instead of why don't I have that superpower, it went a lot better. You know. Yeah, so I'm just using the paintbrush to kind of like do the last finessing. Here's our entrance to something. That's kind of interesting. Like, you know, I like to zoom out, just kind of like see what it looks like. But so for your suggested homework assignment, from what I've gathered and seen so far, the work looks like it's ready. Pay attention though to how crisp of a line that we create when shapes change. That's really the important part. What you kind of get into, utilize some of the techniques, but try to get inventive. I want to see what you guys invent this week. You know, be fun. I know it's not like a conceptual class; it's very just more derived on technique, but it's gotta have fun too, right? A little bit of overlay. I just want to slightly darken down that edge so that it sort of breaks harder. Like if I make it really dark, it's gonna feel like it's actually like a concaved, not flat, but like it breaks inward. You know, so value control is a powerful tool, even though it's something like we learn really early on in our art career, our art education values, but it's like everything, dude. It's like math. Just like that stroke made it push in, like it does things very, very quickly. Okay, it's a little dark back there, so I know some of the values have to lighten up just a little bit. And here's the thing, I just want to make sure that I also make a point of this, is don't do the lighting and the stuff that I'm doing right now with the color until you're done with the basic photo lay-in with the dimensions of your shape. Because if we do photo and lighting at the same time, it's a battle. It's really hard to do both at the same time, so let one settle first and then do the other. It becomes way more approachable. Dude, this thing is looking kind of cool, man. I feel like going camping this weekend. Holy cow, dude. Actually, let's put a little we'll put a little van in here, and like a little family going camping or something. Maybe we'll add that in later. It'll be fun. This is totally
Way to make the artichoke work. That was cool.
What's that?
Way to make the artichoke work. That was cool.
It's like we gotta make it work, And I think so. There's two schools of thought whenever we're doing art, when it's not for the job, because when I do personal work and I come into a problem, I just change the idea so that it's easier. You guys know what I mean? I'm like, oh, this is hard. Let me just change the idea so I do something easier. But something happens when you kind of force yourself into a design problem. Like, gotta use that artichoke. You got to. And you eventually solve it somehow, right? That puts another like little notch in your brain about, oh, I solved it this way. Maybe I can use that in the future. So sometimes it's fun to do that, Force yourself into a design problem. I guess that's the idea. It's like concept art shadowboxing.
Have you ever gotten that from like a client, where they were like, we really want to include this texture, and you had to, problem solve that?
Sometimes. So let's say it's like a big early on blue sky world building kind of assignment. I used to do this a lot with like League of Legends and stuff, where they're like, James, show us before you do art, because art is time consuming. Show us your influence. So I'll get a lot of photos like artichoke and castles and upside down tree, and I'll just show them this big photo mood board, and they're like, ooh, and I'll just base it on reaction. The reaction tells me what flavor they like, so I'll start basing those in my design first. So it is like that, yes. But I include the client's conversation in there.
Yeah, that's cool. Kind of like gauging their taste.
Mm-hmm, exactly, because that's all it is, man. And I relate it to kind of like, it reminds me when I was like first dating my wife. Like, I need to gauge her interest. Like, I can't just take her to all my car stuff and all this dude stuff. Like it's gonna be a bad relationship, right? So yeah. Eventually, yeah, it's so much like that. But once you figure out what your art director tends to like and dislike, it becomes easier to design.
Yeah, like knowing what cuisine they're in the mood for, kind of thing. Back to the food references.
Yep. All right. So just like how we were working this week on the initial stitch, right? The stitching of basically the two major planes, right? The top plane, side plane. But now we have top plane, side plane. Maybe it's even a little curved. I'm getting all these messages right now. Right? It's like getting some of these visual elements to give it that, just that little bit of silhouette right there. It makes it feel like your eye will pick it up and you're like, are those all curved? Now, imagine yourself as a knight and you're walking under this thing and there's like smoke and lava bits like showing through some of the cracks and crevices. Now we're like in a world, So a lot of time in concept design, we're creating these images to have a context to share an idea. You know, we'll go into a room and like just have this image like on a big TV and we'll just look at it and be like, what do you guys think and feel and see? And all these other departments like story people and gameplay people and character design people, they'll all come in and look at this image and give their input and read. And it just like blows your mind. You're like, oh my gosh, I want to go back to my desk right now and just like design more, you know, because this thing starts a conversation. And that's what's really fun about having this kind of technique. That's kind of quick, fast, effective. Allows for that conversation to happen sooner than later. A lot of people like that. I'm just going through here, and I can talk a lot right now because this isn't very. It's not racking the brain. Like I don't have to focus too hard. I just need to make sure things connect.
So I see these being really useful for more realistic projects. Would you use similar techniques and processes if you were trying to photo bash for more stylized pieces?
Yes. The only difference is we have to make sure the source material has the style in it. Does that make sense? Because you can use the same photos. So let's say if I'm doing, because I used to work for Blur Studios a lot, and they make a lot of cinematics, and they also make their own movies and stuff like Deadpool. But they'll work on, because they do cinematics, they'll do something for like Fortnite or like those types of things, and all the way to like Deadpool, you know. But they'll like to work with the same artists all the time because it's the communication and the workflow that they really like. Yeah. So for me, it's about making sure that I get good assets. These photos are assets. They just happen to be in the realistic category. So I have to find or perhaps even make them ahead of time to do this technique. Does that make sense? You know, because the source material just needs to be, like instead of raw onions, they just got to grill them a little bit. Like there's just like a little bit of a step in between, you know?
So it goes back to the whole like kick bashing thing, making sure the pieces actually represent what it is you're making. So yeah, absolutely. It becomes but here's the thing too, though, is for myself, speaking only just from my experience, is because I worked so much in this realm of realism, I don't really get the work that's like stylized. You know what I mean? I'll get them once in a while when I have an art director that really likes to work with me. And the finished product doesn't have to match the style. It's more of just what's being designed. So there's kind of differences there, a little bit of differences. All right. Gotcha.
I remember going to I don't know if you guys know the place. It's Yosemite. You know, where they have like El Capitan, like these big waterfalls, big national park in California, and there's this like ginormous boulder or ginormous mountain, and the tour guide was like, look, you could see people climbing. And we're like, what? And you had to look so hard because they're like microscopic, because we couldn't we can't fathom the scale, you know. But then when once we understood it, we saw that person, we're like, oh my gosh, like the whole thing just got so much more impressive, you know. I'm trying to think about and go back to times where I've been to a similar place like this, right? Have you guys ever been to a place like this where you're like, ooh, it's impressive, and you just start to scan and look at details, and every time you look further, you like discover this new thing about this rock? We're trying to bring that. That's this last part. Like we can stitch and just make sure it looks good, and then we can also add in a little bit more value, which while we're doing that, we're bringing in that element, you know? And I like to talk about this a lot right now because, you know, nowadays technology can generate a lot of the generic, like real fast. You know what I mean, guys? But it's the things that you experience that bring in the subtle nuance of reality. That's your jam. You know, that's what element you're going to add to the design. That's what's going to keep you in the front seat of design, because it's the experience that you've done for 20, 30,
35 years or however you guys all are aged, like you have all of that experience, and trying to channel that with your techniques, ooh, that's where I think like the reality sets in, that like that's where the power is in designing. Tools are always going to get better later on when you guys are like seasoned, working 20 years in the industry. There's going to be another technology where you're like, damn, reminds me of XYZ, right? It's going to be like that, That's kind of like how history is, actually, if you study a lot of history, All right.
Yeah, it actually just reminded me, like you were talking about, like, that experience in Yosemite. But, I was driving through Utah on my way to another national park, and we came across this state park. It was, I think, called Goblin State Park. And, man, it was just so desolate. And I was like looking at your piece, and I was like, what place have I experienced that kind of felt like that? And, yeah, I haven't like included that in any of my pieces, but that's something I'll be thinking about this week.
Yep. That's when it's, but it happens in phases, like we have to learn how to write the alphabet. We have to learn how to read before we tell a story, and for some of us, we're in that learning phase of learning the alphabet and how to write and read, it's a complex language. But eventually it does come to that point where it's like, what are you saying? And that'll take the front seat. That'll definitely take the front seat. In this industry, there's a good enough. There's the top tier, which a lot of us tend to look at and our favorite artists, but the industry isn't requiring everyone to be there. It's kind of like in baseball, like there's like the all-star, there's like a few, right? But to be in the team is you have to have the fundamentals, and that's what's very, very important. That's what gets you to that point first, So why am I saying that? It's like you're going to develop skill. We're going to develop the techniques and everything. It's all a matter of time, but eventually we're all going to be in this game of, designing for film, designing for games, like whatever it is, and that's going to be important, to kind of like focus on that. All right, just pushing it back a little bit. So first I worked on the form, making sure like things are connecting. Now I'm just giving it a little bit of atmosphere. And I tend to forget sometimes that atmosphere not only works at distance, but it also works in verticality, right? So things that are technically, if we actually took a measuring tape from the camera, like the cave is the closest thing to us. The point up top at an angle is furthest away, right? Like in the vertical realm. So we want to make sure we're pushing that sensibility further, make it, like it's getting really absorbed by the bounce light here. Okay, so overall steps, it's very similar from last week. We're just getting a little bit more, we're adding more elements to it. Okay, this week we're adding in a ground and a sky. It's the only real big difference, because you guys can do the same texturing that you did last week with the flat shape, and it'll work pretty well. It'll be a great exercise. But let's say you want to take it a little bit further. Okay, try to design the ground. Try to add in a point of interest within your point of interest, so then now the ground has a purpose to kind of lead you in. Like we kind of go up this hill, because we don't just look at ground. Naturally we think about, well, how do I walk on this thing? We're so conditioned to be like, oh, how do I walk? How do I get around? So like, how do we go? Some of us would jump up this thing because we're like super adventurous. And other people would be like, no, I'm gonna take the easy way. I'm gonna go this way, right? And then you see how these rhythms on the ground kind of just like all leads you to the cave. See that? How they're all like kind of pointing you there, So kind of just led that way. So we can use the ground to guide the eye to a very special place within your point of interest, like the actual focal point. And that's the only difference for this week. Okay. I'd love to see if you guys could just rock out one of these, but once you do one, it's like you kind of know the recipe. It becomes easier to do another one. Just don't go from rock to like, I'm gonna design a spaceship, right? Like, don't go that far, right? But go like a little bit gradual, and then it becomes super comfortable. Like go I'm gonna add water on the ground. I'll put a waterfall on this rock. Let me add birds. Let me put cactus, foreground, middle ground, background, cactus. Like you can just keep adding complexity, mild, medium, spicy, right? To give it more life, you know? But isn't it kind of cool? We can get in 2 hours, we can get a pretty resolved visual painting, you know, while talking through it, you know, so initially like these paintings would have taken me quite a bit of time, you know, I would say all day would be an underestimate, okay, to just do one. But later on, you're just like, you just learn how to peel the onion faster, you know, and it just gets really fast because you just know what techniques are lined up, you know. So let's try that this week. How's that sound? Cool? Yeah. And just like we can learn something from this past week's assignment too, which is we don't always have to like invent a really clever, cool idea to have fun with designing. You know, just doing this cubic rock is like, it's actually kind of fun, right? You know, we get pleasure from it, you know. So keep it simple, guys. Work it up, you know, work up the complexity. Try to also do this little design exercise where first, and maybe just as a reminder, that's what we did. We actually did this. We designed the shape. And we just didn't use our first one. We gave it a couple passes. We thought about, you know, kind of the design theory that we're using. And I just kind of selected the one that I thought had the most potential, you know. So we'll start here. A couple silhouettes. Boom. And eventually, like working with an art director, they'll just see this and they're like, oh, okay, I know how to change this silhouette. And then you can probably just take it from there and finish it off. So it becomes like a really good workflow system. All right. That's it. That's all I got. Cool.